In war-torn London, a midwife and a lost guide dog forge an unlikely alliance. As bombs fall and chaos reigns, they navigate treacherous streets, racing against time to save lives. But their partnership faces opposition from authorities, testing their resolve. When the city's darkest night arrives, bringing unprecedented danger, they must make impossible choices. Will their bond survive the ultimate trial? Discover a tale of courage, hope, and unexpected heroes in humanity's darkest hour.
Darkness swallowed London like a hungry beast. Emma Wright, a 28-year-old midwife, looked out the window of St. Mary's Hospital, watching the dancing shadows cast by the searchlights sweeping across the night sky. The distant sound of aeroplane engines made her heart race. Another air raid was approaching, another night of chaos and destruction. She sighed, adjusting the collar of her pristine white uniform, knowing that soon she would be navigating the darkened streets to attend to her patients. The phone rang, shrill and urgent. Emma quickly answered, her calm voice masking the anxiety she felt. St. Mary's Maternity, Nurse Wright speaking. On the other end of the line, a tense and breathless male voice begged for help. His wife was in labor. The baby was coming too fast. Emma noted the address, promising to arrive as quickly as possible. She grabbed her midwife's bag, filled with essential supplies, and prepared to face the night. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, a golden-haired Labrador retriever named Beacon was restless. His owner, a blind civil defense worker, had gone out to check the local air raid shelters. Beacon, trained as a guide dog, waited patiently at home, his ears attentive to the increasingly close sounds of enemy aircraft. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shook the building. Beacon barked alarmedly, his instincts telling him that something was terribly wrong. The dog ran to the door, scratching at the wood, desperate to find his owner. When he finally managed to get out, he was met with a scene of chaos. People were running through the streets, screams echoed between buildings, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Beacon sniffed the air, trying to catch the familiar scent of his owner. But amidst the confusion and panic, the Labrador found himself alone and disoriented, separated from the man who was his entire world. Emma ran through the dark streets, her midwife's bag slapping against her hip with each hurried step. The air raid sirens wailed, a constant reminder of the danger overhead. She moved with purpose, her eyes alert to the dimly lit street signs. Suddenly, a movement caught her attention. A large golden dog emerged from the shadows, looking lost and frightened. Emma hesitated for a moment, her instinct to help battling against the urgency of her mission. "Hey, boy," she called softly, noticing the dog's collar and leash. He was clearly a guide dog, but where was his owner? The Labrador approached her, his nose gently touching her hand. Emma saw the fear in the animal's eyes, but also a surprising intelligence and calmness. She looked at her watch, aware of the passing time, then back at the dog. A crazy idea began to form in her mind. "You know these streets, don't you, boy?" she murmured, stroking the dog's head. The Labrador looked at her as if he understood every word. Emma took a deep breath and made a decision. She grabbed the dog's leash and said firmly, "Let's go. We need to get to 221 Baker Street. Can you help me?" To her surprise, the dog seemed to straighten up, as if accepting the mission. With a soft bark, he began to guide her down the dark street. Together, they moved with a speed and confidence that Emma could not have managed on her own. The dog seemed to know every alley and shortcut, skillfully guiding her around debris and avoiding dangerous areas. Emma found herself implicitly trusting this unexpected partner. As they ran through the darkened London, the sounds of war echoing around them, Emma felt a strange sense of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this unlikely partnership was exactly what she needed to survive the difficult nights ahead. The sound of shattering glass cut through the air, followed by distant screams. Emma and her new canine companion instinctively ducked as a deafening crash shook the street. "Good boy," she whispered, her hand buried in the soft fur of the Labrador. The dog, whom she decided to call Beacon, looked at her with intelligent, determined eyes. Together, they stood up and continued their urgent journey through the besieged city. Finally, they reached 221 Baker Street. Emma could hear the sounds of pain coming from inside the house. She turned to Beacon. "Wait here, boy. I'll be right back." Single quotes, the dog obediently sat as Emma rushed inside. In the improvised living room, now serving as a delivery room, she found a young woman clearly in advanced labor and her nervous husband. "I'm here now," Emma said in a calm and reassuring voice, immediately taking control of the situation. The next few hours were a blur of contractions, firm instructions, and words of encouragement. Outside, the bombs continued to fall, but inside that small room, life was about to triumph over destruction. With one final push from the mother and a sharp cry from the baby, a new life entered the world. Emma wrapped the newborn in a clean blanket, handing it to the anxious but radiant mother. When Emma finally left the house, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first rays of dawn. Beacon was exactly where she had left him, vigilant and patient. She knelt beside him, exhausted but happy. "Good job, partner," she said, stroking his ears. "I think we make a good team." The dog barked softly in response, as if agreeing. As they walked back to the hospital, Emma knew that something had changed. Amidst the chaos of war, she had found an unexpected ally, and together they would face whatever came next. The morning sun had barely risen when Emma and Beacon entered St. Mary's Hospital. Dr. James Holloway, a middle-aged man with graying hair and thin-framed glasses, was waiting for them in the hallway, his face a mixture of relief and confusion. "Emma, thank God you're safe. But what is this?" He pointed at Beacon, who sat calmly beside Emma. She took a deep breath, preparing to explain her unusual night and her new partnership. "Dr. Holloway, this is Beacon. Well, he helped me get to my patient last night," Emma quickly recounted. How she had found the guide dog and how he had led her through the dark and dangerous streets. The doctor listened with a skeptical expression, his eyebrows furrowing into a worried frown. "Emma, I understand that the situation is difficult, but relying on a lost dog, that's too risky. What if he had led you to the wrong place?" Emma felt a wave of frustration. "But he didn't, doctor. Beacon helped me get there in time to deliver a difficult birth. Without him, I could have gotten lost, or worse." She placed her hand on Beacon's shoulder, feeling oddly protective. "I believe he could be a great asset to us. Think of how many women need our help and how dangerous it is to reach them. With Beacon, we could do it more safely. Doctor." Holloway sighed, removing his glasses to rub them with a handkerchief. "Emma, I understand your point of view, but we can't depend on an animal for something as crucial as our work." He looked at Beacon, who maintained a dignified and attentive posture. "Besides, he probably has an owner who is looking for him. We can't just keep him here." Emma felt her heart sink but knew the doctor had a point. However, she wasn't ready to give up on her newly formed idea. In the days that followed, Emma divided her time between her duties at the hospital and searching for Beacon's owner. She hung up posters, spoke with civil defense, and visited animal shelters, all to no avail. Meanwhile, Beacon became a constant presence by her side, quickly winning the affection of the hospital staff and patients. Emma watched in amazement as the dog seemed to intuitively understand the layout of the hospital, guiding her through the corridors without hesitation. One afternoon, while Emma was making her rounds, a sudden air raid caught everyone by surprise. Panic quickly spread among the patients, but Beacon remained calm. With surprising confidence, the dog began guiding Emma from room to room, helping her calm the patients and lead them to safer areas. His calm presence seemed to have a soothing effect on everyone around him, including Emma. Dr. Holloway, who was upstairs when the attack began, was impressed to see how Emma and Beacon worked together in perfect sync. When the signal that the danger had passed finally sounded, he approached Emma, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "Well, Miss Wright," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips, "it seems I underestimated your canine partner. What do you think about starting to officially train Beacon to assist in emergency situations?" Emma's face lit up with a radiant smile. "That would be wonderful, Doctor. I'm sure Beacon can learn even more." She knelt beside the dog, gently stroking his ears. "What do you think, Boar? Ready to become a war hero?" Beacon barked joyfully in response, as if he perfectly understood what was being proposed. Emma laughed, feeling a wave of hope. Perhaps, amidst all this darkness, they had found an unexpected light. Weeks passed, and the partnership between Emma and Beacon grew stronger. The dog learned to recognize the specific sounds of air raid sirens, often alerting Emma and the hospital staff even before the official alarms sounded. His ability to navigate the darkened streets during blackouts proved invaluable, allowing Emma to reach patients in areas that would otherwise be inaccessible. Dr. Holloway, initially skeptical, was now one of the biggest advocates for Beacon's presence in the hospital. One particularly busy night, Emma received an urgent call. A pregnant woman was trapped in a partially demolished building near a crowded air raid shelter. With Beacon by her side, Emma set off immediately. The streets were chaotic, with rescue teams and firefighters running back and forth. Beacon, however, remained focused, skillfully guiding Emma through the debris and confusion. As they approached the site, Beacon suddenly stopped, his ears alert. He began barking insistently, pulling Emma away from the path they were following. Confused, but trusting the dog's instinct, Emma followed him. Seconds later, an explosion shook the air, right where they would have been if they had continued. Emma's heart raced as she realized Beacon had sensed the danger and saved them from an undetonated bomb. Recovering from the shock, Emma quickly alerted the authorities about the bomb. Thanks to the timely warning, the area was evacuated, including the nearby air raid shelter, saving dozens of lives. Emma finally reached her patient, successfully delivering the baby amidst the chaos. When they returned to the hospital, the news of Beacon's feat had already spread. Dr. Holloway greeted them with a mixture of relief and admiration. "You too," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "are true heroes." Emma hugged Beacon, tears in her eyes. At that moment, she knew they had found their purpose in this war, bringing hope and life amidst the destruction. As the months passed, the fame of Emma and Beacon spread throughout London. Their feats inspired hope in dark times, but they also attracted unwanted attention. One cold autumn morning, Emma was summoned to Dr. Holloway's office. The doctor's face was tense when she entered, Beacon faithfully by her side. "Emma, we have a problem," he said, handing her an official document. It was an order from the Ministry of Health, questioning the presence of a dog in the hospital and on the streets during blackouts. "They can't do this," Emma exclaimed, her voice trembling with indignation. "Beacon has saved lives. He is essential to our work." Dr. Holloway sighed heavily. "I know, Emma. Believe me, I've tried to argue in our favor. But with scarce resources and hygiene concerns, they see Beacon as an unnecessary risk." Emma felt tears of frustration well up in her eyes. The thought of continuing her work without Beacon now seemed impossible. Determined to fight, Emma began a campaign to keep Beacon. She collected testimonials from patients and colleagues, meticulously documented every instance where Beacon had made a difference. However, the authorities remained unyielding. The restrictions on civilian movement were becoming more severe, and the presence of a dog on the streets during air raids was seen as a public safety risk. As the bureaucratic battle unfolded, Emma and Beacon continued their work, each day fearing it might be the last. The tension in the hospital was palpable, with everyone aware of how much they depended on this unusual partnership. Emma knew she was fighting not just for Beacon, but for all the lives they could still save together. The war had brought many hardships, but she was not willing to give up this light they had found amidst the darkness. The wail of the sirens tore through the night air, more intense and urgent than Emma had ever heard before. She exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Holloway. "It's the red alert," he said gravely. "They're predicting the worst attack yet." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. Beside her, Beacon stood alert, his eyes fixed on her, ready to act. Little did they know that this night would test the limits of their partnership. As the hospital prepared for the inevitable influx of wounded, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was pure panic. "Please help. My wife. The baby. We're trapped." It was a man named Thomas O'Brien. His wife, Sarah, was in premature labor in their apartment, now partially collapsed by a nearby bomb. Emma looked at Beacon, then at Dr. Holloway. "I have to go," she said simply. Dr. Holloway hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Go, but be careful, for God's sake." Emma grabbed her midwife's bag and ran into the night with Beacon. The streets were a chaos of sirens, screams, and the distant rumble of explosions. The sky was lit by searchlights and the sinister glow of fires. Beacon guided Emma with determination, his keen senses navigating through the confusion and debris. As they neared the address, the scene became increasingly desolate. Buildings on fire, rescue teams shouting instructions, civilians in panic running for the shelters. Emma felt fear threatening to overwhelm her, but Beacon's firm touch on her hand kept her focused. They had a job to do, a life. No, 2 lives to save. Taking a deep breath, Emma prepared to face what might be the biggest challenge of her life. The O'Brien building was a nightmare. Half the structure had collapsed, leaving apartments exposed like a macabre dollhouse. Emma could hear screams coming from inside. Sarah. "Thomas!" she called, her voice almost lost in the chaos around her. A faint cry answered, guiding her. With Beacon leading the way, they carefully entered the unstable building. Every step was a risk, with debris falling and the floor creaking dangerously underfoot. Finally, they reached the O'Brien apartment. Thomas, a young man with a face covered in dust and blood, was kneeling beside his wife. Sarah was lying on the floor, her face contorted with pain, a pool of amniotic fluid around her. "The baby's coming," Emma said quickly, assessing the situation. She knelt beside Sarah, trying to stay calm as the building trembled with each nearby explosion. Emma worked quickly, her skilled hands guiding the baby into the world amidst the chaos of war. Beacon remained vigilant, his ears attuned to any sign of imminent danger. When the newborn's cry finally pierced the air, it was like a ray of hope in the midst of darkness. Emma wrapped the baby in her coat, handing it to Sarah's trembling arms. "It's a girl," she said, a tired smile on her face. But the joy was brief. A deafening crash shook the building, and Emma watched in horror as cracks spread across the walls. "We have to get out of here now," she shouted. Thomas picked up Sarah in his arms, the baby clutched to her chest. Emma grabbed her bag and Beacon's leash. Together, they began the dangerous journey out of the collapsing building. Every second was crucial. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Emma could only pray that Beacon would guide them safely through this hell. The building groaned and trembled around them as they descended the unstable stairs. Emma went ahead, guided by Beacon, lighting the way with a dim flashlight. Thomas followed closely behind, carrying Sarah and the baby. With each step, chunks of concrete and plaster fell on them. Suddenly, Beacon stopped, his ears alert. Before Emma could react, the dog pushed her back, just as a metal beam crashed down where she had been standing. "Beacon!" Emma cried, her heart racing. The dog was trapped under the rubble, whining softly. Emma moved to help him, but Thomas grabbed her. "There's no time," he said urgently. "The building will collapse any moment." Emma hesitated, torn between saving Beacon and ensuring the O'Brien family's safety. With tears in her eyes, she made the hardest choice of her life. "Go," she ordered Thomas. "I'll get Beacon and follow you." As Thomas led his family to safety, Emma worked frantically to free Beacon. Minutes felt like hours, every second threatening to be the last. Finally, with one last effort, she managed to move the debris enough to pull Beacon out. The dog was injured, limping visibly, but alive. Emma picked him up in her arms, ignoring the weight and her own exhaustion. "Come on, boy," she murmured. "We're both getting out of here." With Beacon in her arms, Emma ran down the stairs, the sound of the collapse growing louder behind her. She could see the exit, a rectangle of light in the midst of darkness. With one final desperate effort, Emma threw herself outside, rolling on the ground with Beacon just as the structure finally gave way. A cloud of dust engulfed them, and for a moment everything was silent. When the dust settled, Emma found herself surrounded by paramedics and firefighters. Someone tried to take Beacon from her arms, but she refused to let go. "He needs help," she managed to say between bouts of coughing. A young doctor approached gently, examining Beacon while still in Emma's arms. "He has a few broken ribs and cuts, but he'll survive," the doctor assured. "Just like you, thanks to him." Emma hugged Beacon carefully, tears of relief running down her dirty face. Not far away, Emma spotted the O'Briens. Sarah was lying on a stretcher, the baby safely wrapped in her arms, Thomas by her side. Emma struggled to her feet and went to them, still carrying Beacon. "How are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Sarah looked at her with grateful eyes. "We're fine, thanks to you and Beacon," she replied. "Our daughter, we'd like to name her Hope, because that's what you two gave us tonight." Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Amidst all the destruction and chaos, here was a new life, a symbol of hope. She looked at Beacon, who despite his injuries, remained vigilant and protective. "Did you hear that, boy?" she whispered. You helped bring hope into the world. At that moment, despite the exhaustion and pain, Emma felt a deep sense of purpose. She and Beacon had made a difference, not just by saving lives, but by bringing light to the darkness. The sirens of ambulances pierced the night air as the wounded were taken to hospitals. Emma insisted on staying with Beacon, refusing to leave him alone. As they were transported, she reflected on the surreal night they had lived through. The war had shown its cruelest side, but it had also revealed the incredible strength of the human and canine spirit. Emma knew that as long as she had Beacon by her side, she could face any challenge that lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, the story of Emma and Beacon spread throughout London. Newspapers published articles about the brave midwife and her faithful guide dog, who had defied the bombs to save her family. Letters of thanks arrived daily at the hospital, many containing donations for Beacon's treatment. Public opinion was firmly on the duo's side, and soon the authorities had no choice but to reconsider their position on Beacon's presence in the hospital. Dr. Holloway, who had spent sleepless nights worrying about Emma and Beacon, now proudly smiled whenever he saw them. "You two proved me wrong in doubting you," he admitted one day. "Beacon is not just a dog. He's a war hero." Emma, still recovering from her own injuries, hugged the doctor with tears in her eyes. Beacon's acceptance meant more to her than any medal or official recognition. As Beacon recovered, Emma noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He seemed even more attentive, more protective. The horrors they had faced together had created an unbreakable bond between them. Emma knew she would never be the same, and she suspected that Beacon wouldn't either. They had seen the worst of humanity, but also its best, and it had deeply transformed them. One day, as they walked through the hospital, Beacon still limping slightly, but determined as ever, Emma stopped to observe the patients and staff who smiled and waved at them. She knelt beside Beacon, stroking his ears. "Look what we've done, boy," she whispered. "We've brought a little hope back." Beacon looked at her, his eyes full of understanding and love. Together, they had found a purpose greater than they could have ever imagined, and Emma knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. Years after the war ended, Emma Wright walked through the halls of St. Mary's Hospital, now the head of the obstetrics department. Beside her, a young Labrador guided her confidently, his eyes attentive and vigilant. This was Scout Beacon's grandson, specially trained to assist in medical emergencies. Beacon's legacy lived on, not only through Scout, but in a pioneering program of assistance dogs in hospitals throughout England. Emma stopped in front of a framed photograph on the wall. She and Beacon, younger and marked by war, but with determined looks. Below, a plaque read, "In memory of Beacon, who taught us that courage and compassion know no species." Emma smiled, remembering all the lives they had touched, all the changes they had inspired. The war was over, but the fight for life continued, and thanks to an unlikely partnership born in the darkest hours, that fight now had unexpected and devoted allies.